The Omega was given to the Lycan king as punishment by her stepmother, but he loved her like never before. A cold wind swept through the streets of the capital, carrying with it the faint scent of snow and the deeper scent of fear. In the tall, narrow windows of the castle, shadows flickered like restless spirits. Within one of those windows stood Ilara, the youngest daughter of a noble house, her dark eyes reflecting both fear and defiance. Her stepmother, Lady Morgeth, moved like a shadow behind her father's throne, always whispering, always plotting. For years, Ilara had been forced to live under her poisonous influence. Morgeth was clever, ambitious, and cruel in ways that hid behind polite words and smiles. Tonight, her cruelty took a form more terrifying than anything Ilara had faced before. "You will go to him," Morgeth said, her voice sharp but calm, as if stating a fact rather than a punishment. "The Lycan king awaits. Your presence there is necessary." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She knew what that meant. The Lycan king was a figure spoken of in both fear and awe. He ruled a kingdom of shadowed forests and jagged mountains, where wolves, both wild and unnatural, ran free. Stories told of his power, of his pack that obeyed him as if he were a god. To be sent to him as a gift, it was not a blessing. "You mean as a prisoner?" Ilara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Morgeth's eyes were cold. "As a gift, yes. You will go and you will serve as the offering. Consider it a lesson in obedience." Ilara felt her chest tighten. The words were meant to break her, and in some small way they did, but a spark of defiance remained. She had survived Morgeth's schemes before, and she would survive this as well, somehow. The journey to the Lycan kingdom was long and dangerous. Ilara rode in a carriage drawn by black horses, whose hooves clicked like distant thunder against the cobblestones. The road stretched through forests so dense that the moonlight barely touched the ground. Strange sounds followed them, wolves howling in the distance, the wind whispering through the trees, and sometimes the feeling of unseen eyes watching her. It was on the third night that she first saw him. Standing atop a ridge, shrouded in the silver glow of the moon, was the Lycan king. His presence was immediate, like a storm gathering strength. His hair was dark as midnight, his eyes a piercing amber that seemed to look straight into her soul. He did not move closer, nor did he speak, but the air around him felt alive with power. Ilara's heart raced. There was fear, yes, but also something else, a strange, magnetic pull she could not explain. She forced herself to look away, afraid that even her gaze might betray her. When the carriage finally reached the outskirts of the Lycan kingdom, the air grew colder. The trees here were taller, their branches twisting like fingers reaching for the sky. Strange flowers glowed faintly in the dark, their light both beautiful and eerie. Wolves emerged from the shadows, their eyes shining, but they did not attack. They simply watched. The castle itself was carved into the mountain, jagged and black, rising like a sentinel of stone. Kaelin's throne room was vast, its walls etched with runes that pulsed faintly with magic. Torches burned along the corridors, casting shadows that danced like living things. Ilara was brought before the Lycan king. He stood at the center of the room, his posture regal yet relaxed. He did not speak at first. He simply observed her, and for a long moment neither moved. She felt as though he could see every thought, every secret fear she had ever held. "You are the one my gift brings," he said finally, his voice low and smooth, carrying both authority and a quiet curiosity. "Yes," Ilara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt exposed, as if he could see through her very being. Kaelin's eyes softened slightly, though the air of power around him never diminished. "Many come before me," he said, "but few have eyes that do not fear me entirely." Ilara lifted her chin. "I do not wish to fear you." The Lycan king studied her. Then with a movement swift as thought, he stepped closer. His presence was overwhelming yet strangely comforting. "You are brave," he said, "or foolish, perhaps both." Ilara's pulse quickened. She wanted to step back, but she did not. There was something about him that demanded honesty, a recognition of truth without pretense. Over the next days, she began to learn the rhythms of the kingdom. The wolves of the forest were not merely animals, they were extensions of Kaelin's will. His pack was loyal, fierce, and strangely gentle with her when Kaelin allowed it. She discovered hidden gardens lit by moonlight, corridors that whispered with the voices of the past, and a library filled with scrolls of magic and lore. Kaelin watched her constantly, not as a predator watches prey, but as one who weighs and measures the worth of what is offered. He tested her patience, her courage, and her mind. He asked riddles, set small trials, and observed how she responded. Alara realized that her punishment was also a test, one she had no choice but to endure. Yet in the quiet moments, when the castle was silent and the moon hung high in the sky, Kaelin would speak to her differently. He would ask of her fears, her memories, and sometimes he would share his own. Stories of the loneliness that came with power, of battles fought to protect his people, and of the weight of the crown he bore. It was during one of these quiet nights that Alara felt a strange connection take root. They were seated on a terrace, the wind carrying the scent of snow and pine. "Why do you not strike me down?" she asked softly. Kaelin's amber eyes seemed to reflect the stars themselves. "Because you are not mine to destroy," he replied. "You are here because of others, yes, but even in that there is choice. Not all choices are yours, but how you face them, that is always yours." Alara could not speak. The words struck her deeply, weaving threads of hope through the fear she had carried. For the first time, she felt that perhaps she was more than a pawn in her stepmother's cruel games. Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Neither fully trusted the other, yet neither could deny the subtle bond forming. Alara discovered that Kaelin's strength was not only in his power over wolves or men, but in the restraint he exercised over himself. She also began to notice moments of gentleness, how he paused to observe a wounded wolf pup, or how he remembered the names of those who served him. Then, one evening, the first shadow of true danger fell across the kingdom. A messenger arrived, breathless, warning that a rival pack sought to challenge Kaelin's rule. Alara, standing near the terrace, felt the weight of the prophecy she had heard whispered in the forest. The Omega shall either break the kingdom or bind the king's heart forever. Kaelin's expression darkened, but his eyes found hers. There was an unspoken understanding. What had begun as punishment for her would soon demand courage, loyalty, and a choice that could change both their fates forever. The wolves howled in the distance, a warning and a promise all at once. Alara shivered, but this time it was not just fear, it was anticipation. She would face the shadows, the trials, and the Lycan king himself. And perhaps in the midst of all this darkness, something like hope, or even love, might be found. As Kaelin turned toward the approaching storm on the horizon, Alara whispered to herself, "I will not be broken." And for the first time, the Lycan king did not doubt it. The storm had passed, leaving the sky heavy with clouds and the scent of wet pine drifting from the forest. Alara stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the moon struggle to pierce the gloom. The night was quiet, yet her heart was not. Every step she had taken within the Lycan kingdom seemed to pull her deeper into a world of shadow and power, where every glance carried meaning, and every silence spoke louder than words. Kaelin had spent the night walking the ramparts, ensuring the pack was ready. When he returned, he found her standing there as though waiting for him. His approach was silent, measured, like a shadow blending into the night. "You watch too closely," he said, his voice calm but edged with curiosity. Alara turned to meet his gaze. "Perhaps I am learning," she replied softly. "Or perhaps I am simply trying to understand a world that is not mine." Kaelin studied her, amber eyes reflecting the pale light of the moon. There was something about the way she spoke, honest, unafraid, yet aware of her own vulnerability, that intrigued him. Most who came to his kingdom cowered. She did not. "Learning," he repeated almost to himself. Then, in a softer tone, "You are clever, Alara, more than I expected from one given to me as a gift." Alara's lips pressed together, resisting the urge to speak more. She had learned quickly that words could be dangerous here. A single misstep could be seen as defiance or weakness. And yet, Kaelin's gaze was not judgmental. It was searching, as if trying to find the truth buried within her. The days that followed were a careful dance of observation and small trials. Kaelin introduced her to the pack, a group as loyal as they were fierce. Some were wary, others curious, but all watched her with the same eyes that seemed to measure worth and intent. She quickly learned the rules of the kingdom. Strength mattered, yes, but so did cleverness and restraint. Alara discovered that Kaelin's power extended beyond the physical. He could command the wolves with a mere gesture, speak to the forest as if it were alive, and even silence the echoes of the mountains when needed. Yet beneath this power, she saw glimpses of the man behind the crown. In the quiet moments, he moved with care, checking the wounded, speaking gently to the young and lost, and always carrying the weight of responsibility that even the strongest shoulders might struggle to bear. One evening, Kaelin led her into the forest under a blood-red moon. The trees cast long, dark shadows, and the air was thick with magic. Wolves padded silently beside them, their eyes glinting in the moonlight. "Why am I here?" Alara asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, though a tremor of fear ran beneath it. "Why do you test me?" Kaelin stopped, turning to face her. The wolf beside him sat quietly, ears perked, as though sensing the importance of the moment. "Because strength is not enough to survive here," he said. "Not for you, not for me. The world is full of power and danger. How you face it, that is what matters," Alara frowned. "And if I fail," Kaelin's amber eyes softened, "then you learn, but failure here is never final. Only the choice to give up makes it so." For the first time, Alara understood that the Lycan King was not merely testing her. He was offering her the chance to grow, to prove that she could survive and even thrive in a place where the rules were unlike any she had known. Over the next week, Alara's days were filled with lessons and challenges. She learned to read the subtle cues of the pack, to anticipate danger, and to understand the delicate balance of trust and authority. Kaelin observed her constantly, sometimes joining in the trials, sometimes watching silently from the shadows. In one moment during a practice session with the wolves, Alara faltered. A young wolf lunged unexpectedly, and she stumbled backward. Kaelin was at her side before she could recover, steadying her with a hand that was firm yet gentle. "You must trust yourself," he said, "and trust them. Fear weakens you more than any enemy ever could." She nodded, absorbing his words. There was a quiet intensity in the way he spoke, a sense of care beneath the command that left her heart racing. She did not understand why, but she felt drawn to him in ways she could not yet name. As the moon climbed higher, Kaelin led her to a hidden glade, a place where the forest opened to reveal soft grass and a small, shimmering pond. The wolves remained at the edge, watching but silent. "Why here?" Alara asked. "This is a place of reflection," Kaelin replied. "It is where the pack comes when they need clarity, and where I come when I need to remember who I am beneath the crown." Alara looked at her reflection in the water. The girl staring back at her was tired, yet determined. She had been taken from her home, sent into a world of shadows and power, yet she had survived. She had learned. She had grown. And she had begun to understand Kaelin, not just as a king, but as a man burdened by duty, loneliness, and expectation. "You have changed," Kaelin said quietly, as though reading her thoughts. "You are stronger than when you arrived, and yet there is still fear in your heart." "Yes," Alara admitted, "but perhaps it is not the fear of you, but the fear of what I might become." Kaelin's gaze lingered on her, intense and searching. "Do not fear yourself," he said. "Fear is a chain. Choice is freedom. You are capable of more than you know." The bond between them grew slowly, forged in shared trials, quiet conversations, and mutual understanding. Yet the shadow of her stepmother's curse lingered. Lady Morgeth had not sent her as a simple gift. She had woven a web of danger and manipulation. Some of Kaelin's counsel whispered behind closed doors, sowing distrust and testing Alara's loyalty. Others sought to challenge her, questioning why the Lycan king seemed to favor her. One night, as the wind howled through the mountains, Kaelin summoned her to the throne room. The torches flickered, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. "There is unrest," he said, pacing slowly. "A rival pack seeks to challenge my rule. They have grown bold, sensing weakness." Alara swallowed, her stomach tight with tension. "What can I do?" Kaelin stopped and looked at her. "You can be yourself. You are more than the gift your stepmother sent, and your presence, it inspires loyalty in ways that words alone cannot." Alara felt her heart lift and tighten at the same time. His faith in her was both a comfort and a weight. She had been sent here as punishment, yet now, in Kaelin's eyes, she had value and strength beyond what she had ever imagined. The next days were tense. Alara worked alongside Kaelin, helping to prepare defenses and rally the pack. She learned to read the signs of danger, to anticipate moves before they happened, and to act with courage even when fear threatened to overwhelm her. Kaelin was beside her at every step, sometimes guiding silently, other times taking direct action to protect her. During a particularly dangerous encounter, a scout returned with word that the rival pack was near. Kaelin and Alara stood together on the terrace, watching as shadows moved through the forest. "You must remain calm," Kaelin said, his voice steady but urgent. "The pack will follow my lead, but they also watch you. Your courage matters more than you realize." Alara nodded. She had learned to trust herself, but the fear still lingered. Yet as she looked at Kaelin, she realized something new. She did not fear him. She feared the danger outside, the unknown, but she felt a strange strength in facing it alongside him. The rival pack's attack came under the cover of night, wolves and humans moving like shadows through the trees. Alara and Kaelin led the defense, moving with precision and understanding. The battle was fierce, yet swift. By dawn, the rival pack had been repelled, their retreat marked by howls that echoed through the mountains. Kaelin turned to Alara, his expression unreadable. "You were brave," he said softly. "You acted with your heart and your mind. You are more than I expected." Alara felt warmth rise in her chest. "I only followed your guidance," she said. "No," he replied, stepping closer. "You followed yourself. That is what matters." The bond between them had deepened in the heat of danger, forged by shared trials and unspoken understanding. And yet, the shadow of what was to come lingered. Lady Morgath's curse was not finished. The challenges of power, loyalty, and destiny were only beginning. Alara looked at Kaelin, her heart a mixture of fear, admiration, and something she did not yet understand. She realized that this world of shadows, wolves, and kings was no longer just a place of punishment. It was a place where she might find strength, courage, and perhaps even love. But as the sun rose over the jagged mountains, casting light on the scarred but steadfast kingdom, a distant howl carried a warning. Another threat was coming, one that would test not only their courage, but the bond that was slowly growing between them. Alara clenched her fists, determination burning in her chest. She would not falter, she would not be broken. And she would face whatever came next alongside the Lycan king. The kingdom lay in uneasy silence, the aftermath of the rival pack's attack still echoing in every corridor and forest path. Alara had spent the night tending to wounded wolves and observing the pack's reactions. Though the threat had been repelled, the sense of unease lingered like a shadow at the edges of every thought. Kaelin walked beside her along the stone terrace as the first light of dawn touched the jagged peaks. The wind carried the scent of pine and snow, but it could not sweep away the heaviness in their hearts. "You have done well," Kaelin said softly, his voice low as if speaking aloud might shatter the fragile peace. "The pack respects you. They see courage and wisdom in your actions." Alara glanced at him, her thoughts tangled. "I only acted because I had to, because the danger was real. I am not sure I deserve respect." Kalen's amber eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "You have more strength than you realize, Alara. The world does not bend easily to courage, but when it does, it changes everything. You are a force, even if you do not see it yet." She felt a warmth rise in her chest, but it was mixed with doubt. She had been sent here as a punishment, a gift meant to humiliate her. And yet, Kalen had treated her not as a prisoner, but as someone capable of choice, someone capable of greatness. The contradiction confused her, even as it inspired a strange hope. Over the next few days, the kingdom adjusted to the new reality. The rival pack had retreated, but rumors persisted. Some whispered that Lady Morgeth had deeper plans, that her curse on Alara was far from simple, and that her influence might still reach into the mountains. Others spoke of a prophecy, an ancient warning carried by the forest itself. The Omega's heart shall either heal or shatter the Lycan King's soul. Alara had heard the whispers, and they gnawed at her mind. She did not understand the prophecy fully, but she felt its weight. Every glance from Kalen, every challenge in the forest, every cautious wolf that followed her steps reminded her that her presence here was more than mere coincidence. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Alara found herself standing alone in the courtyard. The air was cold, but the glow of torches and the scent of pine made the place feel almost sacred. Kalen approached quietly, as always, his presence commanding yet gentle. "You seem troubled," he said, his voice careful, almost tender. Alara hesitated. I do not know what I am meant to be here. Everything feels like a test, a chain I cannot break." Kalen studied her, his eyes softening. "Chains exist only if you allow them to. Your fears, your doubts, they are real, yes, but they do not define you." She looked at him, searching for meaning in his amber eyes. "And what about you?" she asked quietly. "Do you feel trapped? Do you ever wish you could be free of all this responsibility?" Kalen's gaze turned distant. The lines around his eyes, the quiet weight in his shoulders, revealed a lifetime of burdens. "Every day," he admitted, "I am bound by duty, by expectation, by the pack and the kingdom. Power is not freedom. It is responsibility and sacrifice." Alara's heart ached. She understood now that the Lycan King was not a figure of mere power or fear. He was a man who had given up much of himself to protect those who depended on him. And in that sacrifice, there was a loneliness so deep it seemed to echo through the mountains themselves. Days passed, and with each passing moment the bond between them grew. They trained together, sharing knowledge and skill. Kalen taught her to move with precision, to read the subtle signs of the forest and the pack. She learned not just to survive, but to act with purpose. And in those moments, she glimpsed another side of him, a man capable of patience, of trust, of quiet laughter that carried like music in the wind. Yet the shadow of her stepmother's curse persisted. Alara discovered messages hidden in letters, warnings whispered by servants, and signs of intrigue in the council chambers. Someone had sent a spy disguised as a loyal wolf handler, attempting to turn the pack against her. Kalen uncovered the deception before any harm could be done, but the threat remained. Lady Morgeth's influence was subtle but dangerous, and Alara realized she could not fully trust anyone outside Kalen. One night under the full moon, Kalen led her into the heart of the forest. The air was thick with magic, and the trees seemed to lean closer, listening. Wolves padded silently around them, their eyes bright and attentive. "There is a prophecy," Kalen said, his voice low and almost reverent. "It speaks of an Omega, of one who could either heal or destroy. I fear it may refer to you." Alara's chest tightened. "Me," she whispered. "But I am nothing like that." Kalen shook his head. "You underestimate yourself. There is power in choice, in courage, in the heart that refuses to be broken. That is what the prophecy speaks of, not fate alone but the will to act. They walked together in silence, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves and the distant howl of wolves. And then, suddenly, they were confronted by a shadow in the clearing, a messenger from a distant kingdom, bearing urgent news. A rival faction had grown bold, seeking to challenge Kaelin's authority once more. The prophecy, the curse, the danger, all were converging. Elara felt fear surge through her, but she also felt something else, a determination she had not known she possessed. She looked at Kaelin standing tall and fierce beneath the silver moonlight. "Then we face it," she said firmly, "together." Kaelin's eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed a small smile. "Yes," he agreed, "together." The following days were tense. Elara worked alongside Kaelin, helping to plan defenses, study the rival pack's movements, and rally the loyalty of the wolves. She began to see herself not as a pawn, but as a partner in the kingdom's survival. And yet, every success was tempered by the knowledge that Lady Morgath's curse still lingered, a reminder that her presence in this world was not entirely by choice. During a moment of quiet, Kaelin took her to a secluded glade near a waterfall. The moonlight shimmered on the water, creating a silver glow around them. "You have grown stronger," he said softly, "and not just in skill. Your heart, it is steady, even in the face of fear. That is rare." Elara felt a warmth rise in her chest. She had been sent here as punishment, yet she had found her strength. She had found courage. And in the process she had begun to understand Kaelin, not just as a king, but as a man who carried both power and pain, whose heart had been shaped by centuries of sacrifice. Yet the tension between them remained. They shared moments of closeness, brief touches and quiet glances that spoke of something deeper than words. But each moment was also shadowed by fear, duty, and the lingering threat of the curse. Neither dared to fully acknowledge the growing bond, even as it became impossible to ignore. One night, a messenger arrived with grave news. Lady Morgath had taken action in secret, sending agents to weaken Kaelin's authority and sow discord within the pack. Elara realized that her presence was central to the plan, that her role as Omega was more than symbolic. It was the key to either healing or shattering Kaelin's kingdom. Kaelin stood beside her as they read the message, his expression unreadable. "She is dangerous," he said quietly, "but you are stronger than she believes." Alara's heart pounded. The danger was real, yet she felt ready. She had trained, observed, and learned. She had grown, and she had come to understand Kaelin in ways that no outsider could. And yet, as she looked into his amber eyes, she realized that the prophecy was not just about power or duty. It was about choice, trust, and courage. It was about whether she could face the shadows within and without, and whether she could stand beside the Lycan king, not as a pawn, but as a partner. The night grew darker, the wind carrying the scent of coming storms. Wolves howled in the distance, a warning and a call to readiness. Elara clenched her fists, determination burning in her chest. She would not falter, she would not be broken. And she would face whatever came next, with Kaelin by her side, bound not by chains, but by trust, courage, and a bond forged in fire and shadow. As they prepared for the trials ahead, Elara could not help but wonder what the prophecy truly meant. Would her heart heal the Lycan king, or would the weight of destiny shatter them both? The answer remained hidden in the shadows, waiting for the moment when courage, love, and choice would collide. The forest whispered around them, the wolves' eyes glowing, the moonlight shimmering on leaves. And in that quiet, tense moment, Elara knew that the true test had only just begun. The mountains loomed dark against the dawn, their jagged peaks cutting into the pale sky like broken glass. The kingdom, still scarred from rival packs and the shadow of Lady Morgath's curse, stirred with unease. Elara stood on the terrace of the Lycan king's castle, the wind lifting strands of her dark hair as she gazed toward the forest. Every leaf, every whisper of the wind seemed to speak of danger, yet she did not falter. Kalen approached, his steps quiet but firm, and his amber eyes, deep pools of power and understanding, met hers. "The time has come," he said softly, almost reverently. "The curse is near its end. We must face it together." Alara's chest tightened. She had trained, she had learned, she had grown stronger than she had ever imagined. Yet the weight of destiny pressed heavily upon her. This was no longer a test of courage alone. The prophecy, the curse, and the shadow of her stepmother's schemes would all collide in the coming hours. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear beneath it. Kalen placed a hand gently on her shoulder, a grounding touch that made the wind feel warmer, the shadows less frightening. "You must trust yourself," he said, "and you must trust me. Nothing will succeed unless we act as one. Your heart and mine together, we can break this." The sun had barely begun to rise when the first signs of the curse's power appeared. The forest trembled with unnatural force, the wolves restless and uneasy. Trees bent as if pushed by invisible hands, and shadows moved unnaturally along the edges of the mountains. The air was thick with tension, carrying whispers that only those attuned to magic could hear. Alara and Kalen descended into the heart of the forest, the glade they had visited months before, serving as the center of the ritual they would undertake. Wolves surrounded them, silent and attentive, their eyes reflecting the silver light of the morning. The ground was etched with runes, glowing faintly as Kalen began to chant, invoking the ancient power of the mountains and the loyalty of the pack. Alara closed her eyes, feeling the pull of the curse, the shadow of her stepmother's malice attempting to twist her will. She had learned to face fear, but this was different. The curse was not merely outside her, it was inside her, whispering doubts, stirring old pain, and testing her resolve. "You are ready," Kalen said softly, sensing her hesitation. "Remember, your courage is stronger than their magic. Your heart is your power." Taking a deep breath, Alara stepped forward, allowing the energy of the forest, the pack, and her own inner strength to flow through her. The curse fought back, twisting the wind, bending the shadows, and stirring the wolves into a restless frenzy. But Kalen was there, his presence anchoring her, his power weaving with hers in a delicate, unstoppable rhythm. The air shimmered, the ground trembling beneath them. Alara's heart pounded, her pulse sinking with Kalen's, until the force of their combined will created a light so bright it seemed to chase away the shadows themselves. The trees stopped bending, the wind fell silent, and even the wolves stood still, sensing the shift. Then, as if the curse had realized defeat, a dark figure emerged at the edge of the glade. Lady Morgath. Her eyes gleamed with fury and fear. She had underestimated the bond between the Lycan king and the Omega. "You cannot undo what I have set in motion," she shouted, her voice carrying across the forest like a whip of shadow. Kalen stepped forward, placing himself between Alara and her stepmother. "It is over, Morgath," he said, his voice steady and calm. "You cannot control what courage and loyalty have bound." Alara felt a surge of power. She had trained, she had learned, and she had chosen. Now she would act, not as a pawn, not as a punishment, but as someone capable of shaping her own destiny. The light around her pulsed stronger and the shadows recoiled. With Kalen beside her, she confronted her stepmother, not with anger but with unwavering determination. "You cannot control me anymore," Alara said, her voice carrying over the glade. "I choose my path. And I choose him and this kingdom and the life I will build here." Morgath's scream echoed, but the light of their combined power surged, breaking the curse. The dark energy that had bound Alara weakened, swirling into nothingness, leaving only clarity, warmth, and the gentle hum of the forest in its place. Kalen reached for Alara, taking her hand in his. The connection between them pulsed with energy, not destructive, but healing, steady, and pure. They had faced the shadows together, and in doing so, had transformed both themselves and the kingdom. The wolves howled in unison, a triumphant song that echoed across the mountains. The forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, leaves rustling in celebration. And for the first time since she had arrived, Alara felt truly free. Kalen turned to her, amber eyes soft and luminous. "You were brave," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You faced fear, darkness, and the weight of destiny, and you chose courage." Alara smiled, the tension of months falling away. "I could not have done it without you," she replied. "Without your guidance and your trust." He stepped closer, the wind lifting around them, carrying the scent of pine and the first blossoms of spring. "We did this together," he said, his voice warm. "Because together we are stronger than any shadow." The days that followed were filled with quiet rebuilding. The kingdom, scarred but alive, began to heal. Wolves and humans moved in harmony, forests and mountains regaining their balance, and the court no longer whispered with doubt. Alara's role as Omega was no longer one of fear or punishment. It was one of strength, wisdom, and partnership. She and Kalen spent their time not just in governance, but in understanding each other, forging a bond that had grown in fire and shadow. They trained together, walked the forests, and sometimes simply sat in silence, sharing moments of peace that felt sacred after so much turmoil. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Kalen led Alara to the highest terrace. They stood side by side, looking out over the kingdom they had protected and shaped. "You have changed everything," Kalen said softly. "Not just for me or the pack, but for this land. You have brought hope where there was fear, courage where there was doubt." Alara leaned against him, feeling the warmth and strength he radiated. "And you have taught me to trust, to fight, and to believe that even in darkness light can be found." Kalen turned to her, his expression tender. "I see now," he said, "that the prophecy was never about destruction. It was about transformation of the kingdom, of the pack, and of us. You have healed me in ways I thought impossible." Alara smiled, her heart full. She had arrived here as a gift, a punishment meant to break her. And yet through courage, trust, and the bond they had forged, she had found freedom, purpose, and love. Not the shallow kind whispered in tales, but the deep, enduring kind born of shared trials, understanding, and unwavering loyalty. The forest below rustled with the gentle movement of wolves, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. The mountains seemed to hum with life, the kingdom whole once more. And for Alara and Kalen, the future stretched before them, vast and open, full of promise, shadow, and light. "You are no longer a pawn," Kalen whispered, taking her hand. "You are my equal, my partner, and my heart." Alara squeezed his hand, the warmth of their bond steady and unshakable. "And you are mine," she said softly. "Together we will face whatever comes next, because our hearts are no longer bound by fear or shadow." The wolves howled in celebration. The wind carried whispers of triumph through the trees, and the mountains stood as silent witnesses to the promise forged in courage and love. Under the twilight sky, the Omega and the Lycan king stood together, no longer bound by punishment, prophecy, or fear. They had faced shadows, broken curses, and healed hearts. And in the quiet beauty of the forest and the mountains, they knew that the bond they shared, tempered in trials, strengthened in trust, and illuminated by love, would endure for all the days to come. Alara gazed at Kalen, her heart full, and whispered into the wind, "We were given as pawns, but we became the guardians of our own destiny." Kalen's amber eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "And together, we will write the story of this kingdom and our hearts." As the night descended, soft and serene, the forest whispered around them, the wolves' eyes glimmering in the silver light, and the mountains held their silent promise. The curse had ended. The prophecy had fulfilled itself in unexpected ways. And the Omega and the Lycan king had emerged, not as victims, but as guardians of their own fate, hearts bound by trust, courage, and an enduring, unbreakable love.